Hello, and welcome back to Thinkology. My name is Zach, and in today's Past Pass, we're going to talk about Jared Fogle. Jared, also known as the Subway Guy, gained fame and made his money by being the face of Subway. Many people know that he vanished from the spotlight for disturbing acts against minors, but the details of these allegations and how he got away with it isn't quite as known, so we're going to discuss that today. If you're not in a place to hear about a pedophile, I more than understand, as what Jared did is pretty upsetting, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. For those of you still here, let's talk about Jared's history first, and his rise to the top. When attending Indiana University, Jared weighed 425 pounds. At this time, in 1998, he wanted to lose the weight and he began his Subway diet, which consisted of 2 Subway sandwiches a day, minus cheese and mayo, and a daily walking regimen. Compared to drinking 15 cans of soda and consuming 10,000 calories, these healthier eating habits were bound to help him. That doesn't mean the Subway diet is the best diet out there, but hey, I guess you've got to do what works for you, right? For Jared, this was still a massive improvement. His story was published in his school paper in 1999, and Subway was painted in an incredibly favorable light, like they had been Jared's savior. Some of the article read, "Along with help from Lou, his roommate, Fogle decided to change his lifestyle, yet didn't know how to go about losing that much weight. Fogle tried buying Slim Fast and low-fat frozen dinners. He even tried cooking low-fat food. Nothing worked, and Fogle found himself binging on late-night pizzas and hiding them from Lou. By spring break 1998, Fogle's frustration ended when he finally saw the light one night at Subway. I was looking at the sign of low-fat sandwiches and thought, this is it. This is what I need," Fogle said. "I even remember that first sandwich, the 6-inch turkey." The regiment diet allowed Fogle to easily assess how much to eat as well as how much weight he lost. After 3 months, Fogle stepped up to the scale to see if the Subway diet worked. "I was down to 340 pounds, Fogle said. "I felt awesome. It was the most unbelievable feeling in my life in that point. It only made me work that much harder, and I loved these sandwiches and still eat them." Jared wasn't sponsored by Subway to say this, so imagine how much Subway wanted to hire him after seeing this. The story was picked up by Men's Health, and once Subway caught wind of it, they saw a ton of potential in Jared. Fogle was signed to Subway to tell his story in regional television advertisements before the campaign went national and turned him into a celebrity. He was in commercials with John Cena, he was in a South Park episode, and in 2008, he went on a Tour de Pants where he celebrated maintaining his weight loss for over a decade. At the end of the tour, he retired his famous pair of size 60 pants to a museum, the same ones that he used to hold up to help his audience visualize his weight loss. Subway had become obsessed with Jared. One article around that time said that Subway can't stop jonesing for Jared, and hey, Jared couldn't stop jonesing for them either. Subway had made him a millionaire. Some articles estimate he made $15 million from about 1998 to 2013, and of course, he got free Subway sandwiches for life. The company estimated that a third of their growth was due to Fogle in this time. That's how integral he was to Subway. So then, what's the problem here? Jared and Subway was a win-win relationship, right? Well, the disturbing and unexpected part is that Subway was giving Jared something else that he wanted without necessarily realizing it: access to children. As a result of his celebrity, Jared also formed the Jared Foundation, where Jared was said to spend time making cross-country trips to talk about childhood obesity. He also traveled to various Subway franchises as well, and even made speeches to schools and hospitals through the company itself. He participated in the White House Easter egg run, wrote a self-help book. Jared was around children frequently. Jared also hired a man by the name of Russ Taylor, who had been the youth program manager of the American Heart Association, to work with his nonprofit. Yet, strange cracks were beginning to show in his wholesome image. His charity had raised well over $500,000 between 2008 to 2013, yet they only donated $145,000 of it to actually fight obesity. In fact, they paid out more to their director, Russ, for his salary. "There's a mismatch there between what's promised and what's produced," said Daniel Borochoff, president of Charity Watch. "People need to be wary of celebrity charities," he said. "Oftentimes, it is more about image enhancement than about actual charitable work." And even though Fogle's Subway gig made him a millionaire several times over, he didn't personally donate much to the charity that bore his name, according to records. Yet there was far worse criminal activity yet to come. As early as 2007, in the early days of the foundation, former Florida radio host Rochelle Herman-Walren said that Jared had alarmed her with some of his remarks about children. She claims that on one of his trips to Florida, he told her about his sexual inclinations and his attraction to minors. Rochelle was so disturbed that she rightfully reported the conversation to authorities and continued to pry information from him, while wearing a wire for the next 4 years. ABC News reported, "He would tell me the ages he was interested in, boy or girl," she told ABC News. "He indicated the fact that he has done it before and told me in gross detail what transpired." While the FBI has not confirmed Herman Walren's account, court documents mention that witnesses in Florida, Georgia, and Washington recorded conversations with Fogle regarding his desire to engage in sex acts with minors. He'd said that middle school girls were hot on her show and that, quote, "I like all ages, that's the thing. I mean, it depends. Who is ready for that? You know, who's going to give you the chance?" End quote. Middle school girls aren't ready for sexual relations with Jared. They can't even consent to it, but consent was far from Jared's mind, obviously. Rochelle continually tried to bait him and give the FBI enough information to arrest Jared, but the case dragged on and on. Without any hard physical evidence of him violating the law, these disgusting words just weren't enough. Now, whether or not you believe Rochelle is up to you, since the FBI won't confirm the account of all the people they work with. However, later court documents about this case prove that Jared was engaging in sex acts with minors and, to top it off, soliciting child porn. According to these court documents, Russ Taylor put cameras in his home when he was away. Just security cameras, nothing major unexpected here. However, a minor had been at his home at the time, and according to these documents, the cameras caught her changing and even engaging in personal and private activities not intended to be observed or viewed by others. Rather than immediately delete this footage and rethink his security system, Russ distributed this footage to Jared. The specific details around this incident read, "Over the course of their relationship, Mr. Taylor and Mr. Fogle grew very close, often being referred to by others as an old married couple. Mr. Taylor shared with Mr. Fogle that he had installed a camera for security purposes in his home office, and that unbeknownst to him, it captured a sexual encounter involving an intern and her boyfriend. The two then began to engage in conversation about catching minors on camera and in the bathroom so as to see them in states of nudity." Jared demanded more. Several cameras were put up in bathrooms, young children changing and bathing were all sent to Jared's laptop. Russ continually gave Jared more and more footage for years, and Jared continued to hold more and more power over him. Jared told Russ Taylor that "Daddy is paying for your things," referring to himself and how he funded Taylor's life, seemingly threatening to take it away if Russ didn't do as he wanted. I don't know whether or not Russ Taylor actually intended for things to go this intense, but he's just as guilty as Jared is, and Jared's actions greatly affected the lives of a dozen children and their families at least. And yes, Fogle knew that they were underage, even years later when the case went to court. 8 of the 12 children recorded were still underage as well. One Washington Post article says that the footage was distributed to Jared and others, which would imply that his security camera footage spread further than just Jared, making Taylor's version of events about how he felt obligated to do what Jared said all the less compelling, considering that he was potentially supplying multiple pedophiles. That's just alleged though, as the article doesn't name any of these other people that may have had their hands on his footage. Worst yet, though Jared is disturbing enough to demand this child porn, he took things a step further and solicited sex from minors as well. One article reads, "Fogle timed his business travel to coincide with his pursuit of commercial sex acts," according to the documents. Federal investigators claim he traveled between Indiana and New York City to engage in sexual acts with at least 2 minors, referred to in court documents as Victim 13 and Victim 14. Both victims were female minors who were trafficked online. According to the documents, in one incident on November 3rd, 2012, Fogle paid for sex with victim 13, who was 17 years old at the time, at New York City's Plaza Hotel. He is also alleged to have offered to pay her money if she could find another underage girl for him to have sex with. Fogle, the court documents state, told the girl that the younger the girl, the better. CBS reported that he would also send texts to other escorts, asking if they could provide him with access to 14 and 15-year-old girls, and that he would only make these requests after soliciting these escorts to, quote, "ensure that they were not undercover police officers," end quote. Ultimately, though, it was this investigation into Russ Taylor for child porn that was Jared's undoing. In 2015, his home was raided. Within the blink of an eye, once people realized what a scumbag Jared was, he lost it all. Subway suspended their relationship with Jared Fogle once the word broke. Russ Taylor, who had been arrested in the spring of 2015 for over 400 counts of child porn, was connected to Jared Fogle, not just in business, but as his distributor. Eventually, he too was arrested. His wife divorced him, and Jared was ordered to pay $1.4 million or $100,000 each to his 14 victims. Jared, 37 at the time, pled guilty to the charges, I'm sure in no small part because of the mountains and mountains of evidence against him. Russ Taylor was sentenced to 27 years for his part in the child porn case, whereas Fogle was only sentenced to 15 years and 8 months for possession of child porn. I'm sure that this may be in part because Russ Taylor was actually creating the pornography, as distribution charges are often harsher than possession charges. Even so, the fact that Fogle literally acted on this and slept with a minor who cannot consent by the way, makes me feel that he deserved far more time. Of course, being the Subway guy meant he had a team of expensive lawyers and money talks, seeing as he traveled to Indiana, where the age of consent is 16. Jared was able to get a slap on the wrist, really. His lawyers tried to make the argument that the federal courts didn't have the jurisdiction to convict him, and they tried to seek a 5-year sentence, citing that Jared was profoundly sorry for his actions. Fogle's attorney said in their sentencing memorandum that he will personally address the court. He is painfully aware of the fact he has impacted the lives of minor victims, hurt those closest to him, and for all practical purposes, destroyed the life he worked to build over the last 18 years, the memo said. Since law enforcement searched his house in July, Mr. Fogle has worked to take responsibilities for his conduct, to assist the minor victims in this case, to make amends with his family, and to address his medical issues. The memo continued, adding that he is fully committed to his rehabilitation as a productive member of society. One professor called on by Jared's lawyers said that he suffered from, quote, mild pedophilia, end quote, as if having a sexual interest in teenagers and children is just a mild problem. Jared told sex workers that the younger a child was, the better. That sure doesn't sound mild to me, nor do I think that such heinous acts like this should ever be downplayed, though that's just my opinion. Thankfully, this argument didn't work out, and to many, Jared's sorry only seemed to be a sorry that he got caught kind of thing. His tearful apologies during his 15-year sentencing were pretty lackluster, though one moment Jared had stated that there was no evidence he actually engaged in sex with children. In his plea deal, Jared admitted that he had sex at New York City hotels with 2 girls under the age of 18, one of whom was only 16, and paid them. Again, these girls cannot consent, making this statutory rape based on the laws in New York. Yet, though it was obvious to everyone the heinous acts that Jared had committed, more and more, Subway was thrown into question. It seemed impossible that this could happen for years, right under their nose, without anyone being aware of it. Well, as it turned out, they were perfectly aware, they just didn't care. According to Jared Fogle's wife at the time, now ex-wife, Katie McLaughlin, the company believed that her marriage to Jared would keep him grounded, yet even before they were married, it turns out that Jared was causing problems. On 2 out of the recorded 3 occasions, Subway responded by deploying PR employees rather than calling police, whereas in the 3rd case, Subway still admits the company was not properly escalated or acted upon. The Daily Beast writes, Subway's senior vice president of marketing allegedly received a complaint in 2004 of Fogle soliciting a young girl at a Las Vegas promotional event. In response, the chain sent a PR manager to ask Fogle and the franchise owner about the incident. The victim was not contacted, the lawsuit claims. In 2008, a Florida Subway franchisee warned Subway's then CEO Jeff Moody about Fogle's disturbing comments about children, court papers state. That franchisee, Cindy Mills, claimed Fogle told her he really liked them young. Fogle allegedly told Mills that he had sex with children ages 9 to 16 and that she should consider prostituting herself. Still, Moody interrupted Mills and told her to keep quiet, court papers allege. Please don't tell me anymore, Moody allegedly told Mills, before assuring, don't worry, he has met someone. She is a teacher and he seems to love her very much, and we think she will keep him grounded. Predatory and pedophile behavior shouldn't just be excused because, oh, it's fine, he has a wife now. If Jeff Moody and other executives of franchisees were well aware of Jared's disturbing actions and statements, then at the very least he shouldn't have been allowed to continue these talks and seminars around children under the company's name. If Subway didn't have the nerve and decency to talk to the police, then why send him to more events? The fact is, Jared was their money-making machine, so as long as he wasn't caught doing anything illegal, Subway seemed happy to keep him around. As for the 3rd complaint, that was the one that comes from Rochelle Herman Walren, the journalist who potentially worked with the FBI on this case. Cindy Mills herself is also speaking out about this case, and said that the reason she didn't go to the police on her own after Moody dismissed her is because she was afraid of money and power. Mills' lawyer has stated that she doesn't want to go public with this though, as there's no benefit to her and quote, "It's not her goal to get into the subway angle of this," end quote. Mills did go to the FBI with the texts between her and Jared though, ultimately solidifying all this evidence against Jared and proving him to be undoubtedly as sick and twisted as we already knew. Amidst all this outrage, McLaughlin sued Subway, alleging that they deliberately hid her ex-husband's interest in children. She believed Subway had failed every single test of corporate responsibility, putting her ex-husband around children, and that the safety of kids had been Subway's bottom priority, or at the very least, third behind profits and their biggest spokesman, Jared. However, the lawsuit didn't really go anywhere, as it was thrown away in 2017 due to lack of personal jurisdiction. The Indiana judge stated that each of the Subway entities she sued have principal business operations outside Indiana and were formed in Connecticut and Florida. AP News wrote, Boone County Judge Matthew, Kincaid wrote in his order that McLaughlin's suit argued that Subway had used her marriage to Fogle to ground their valuable pitchmen, and that the company then created a campaign depicting a wholesome narrative of Mr. Fogle's life and emergence as a family man. The problem is that all of those things, if they happened, took place outside of Indiana, the judge wrote. While an argument could still be made that Subway's negligent here, they should be punished for their inaction. That doesn't seem like it's about to happen anytime soon either. As for Subway themselves, sales have been sluggish since the Jared Fogle scandal. There's more competition, and when they raised the price of their $5 footlong subs to $6, customers complained and sued the chain for over $500,000 as the subs weren't actually a foot long. $6 footlong doesn't really have the same ring to it either. More recent articles have said that Subway is dead and knows it, though none of the scandals they've been in have been quite this severe and damaging. There's been a few other things that have contributed to their downfall. The New York Times wrote an entire article called The Big Tuna Sandwich Mystery, questioning if their tuna sandwiches actually use tuna to begin with. Subway spokespeople have said that they have 100% cooked tuna, but tests show that's simply not the case. The lab that was responsible for the testing emailed this New York Times journalists and wrote, "No amplifiable tuna DNA was present in the sample, and so we obtained no amplification products from the DNA. Therefore, we cannot identify the species." The spokesman from the lab offered a bit of analysis. There's two conclusions, he said. One, it's so heavily processed that whatever we could pull out, we couldn't make an identification, or we got some, and there's just nothing there that's tuna. Subway declined to comment on the lab results. If Subway delivers 100% tuna to its customers, then their tuna shouldn't be this difficult to identify. Subway has tried to revamp itself in more recent years as well with their Eat Fresh Refresh menus and making changes to their classic sandwiches, but they simply aren't the business they used to be. The pandemic didn't help matters either, and they reportedly closed as many as 10% of its chains as they struggled with restrictions and slumping sales. A Subway spokesperson has said that the figure isn't quite that high as many closures were temporary, but Insider reported that sales dropped 25% from 2012 to 2017, amidst the end of the Jared Fogle era, and in 2019, sales dropped $210 million. Even if Subway wasn't formally punished for enabling a child predator, I'd like to think that this is karma coming back to get them. As for Jared himself, he's been beaten up in prison and he's as hated as ever. The inmate that beat him up actually received fan mail, with many thanking him for standing up against a child abuser and putting money on his books in the prison. While I don't condone violence, I'm not about to say that I feel bad for Jared either, especially considering the life he has behind bars. One article explained, Jimmy Nigg told AZ Central that his uncle, Stephen, wished to send the Federal Bureau of Prisons, BOP, a message about sex offenders confined in minimum security facilities. In his words, my uncle's words, people convicted of these types of crimes, crimes against children, sexual predators, rapists, they shouldn't be in a minimum security prison, Nigg told azcentral.com. He felt like it wasn't fair. Fogle gets to order any food he wants. He can use his money to do things. This guy is coming and prancing in like he can do anything he wants. Fogle has a pretty cushy life in prison by the sounds of it. He orders honey buns by the box, his favorite day is cake day, he watches movies, crafts in a hobby shop, has a library at his disposal, and won the inmate lottery by being placed in this prison. For many, this simply doesn't sound like justice, especially considering how disturbing Jared's crimes really were. Unfortunately, this still isn't the end. Even worse yet, Russell Taylor's charges have been overturned and he has a new trial date coming up. This may change things for Jared too. We'll have to wait and see. This is in large part due to the fact that much of the content wasn't actually sexually explicit. I'm not saying that Jared didn't see it that way, but as it was only videos of the kids changing, it's harder to make that argument in court. His actions were still sick, there's no doubt about that, but as these security cameras couldn't focus on a child's genitals and the video footage is only of them getting dressed, he may not be in prison for nearly as long as we thought. One source reports, at the evidentiary hearing, counsel admitted that Taylor's was his first federal case, and that he researched the law using Google, papers on the charging statute, and by talking to the Federal Public Defender's Office. It was uncovered that counsel never researched case law to understand the specific elements of the offense that the government had to prove. All of his research was focused on sentencing. Counsel's lack of diligence in researching the law likely came from his desire to secure a plea agreement with the government, the court surmised. Less than 5 hours after he filed his notice of appearance, counsel emailed the prosecutor asking about a plea agreement. Counsel admitted he wanted to reach a global resolution to the case with a favorable sentence. When Taylor told him he didn't want to plead to the 3 charges, counsel advised him it was all or nothing, that he would be much worse off in terms of sentencing if he challenged those charges. If Russ Taylor's case is changed and one is able to make the argument that this isn't technically child porn, then Jared may not be in prison for, well, possession of this child porn. You and I know from a logical standpoint that Jared wasn't viewing this for educational purposes. His words and actions have said as much. Yet, as this is so recent, we're just going to have to wait and see if Jared's victims get the justice they deserve. With all of that said though, as unfortunate a note as it is to end on, that's where I'm wrapping up today's episode of Past Pass. If you want to see more content from me, my personal channel Zach X Fuller is linked in the description below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already and hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next one. See ya!